Hi everyone, David Aragona here with another edition of Horses to Watch, where we take a look back at some races for last weekend, trying to find horses that had trouble in the running, prevented from achieving an optimal result, and could be worth betting back in the future. This is really an exercise in taking trip notes, learning how to assess horses' trouble in a race, and figure out if they're ones that you really do want to follow in their subsequent starts. And this week, we've got three replays to take a look at, different kinds of trouble to talk about. We've got two horses that were making their career debuts, one at Gulfstream Park and one at Oaklawn. And then we're going to take a look at the Rebel Stakes from last weekend, another race from Oaklawn Park, and discuss a horse who was prevented from achieving a top result in that race, a horse that probably isn't going to attract too much support on the Kentucky Derby trail moving forward, but one that did run better than his results might indicate. But let's begin with one of those debut runners, and we'll start with the race from Gulfstream Park last Friday. This was February 23rd, the sixth race on the card, a maiden special weight event going 5 furlongs on the turf for 3-year-old fillies. Let's break these runners from the gate, and we're going to focus on the number 2, Leona, and you can see that she breaks second to last in this field towards the inside. A couple of runners there get shuffled back in the early going, but she is just a horse that doesn't appear to have the early speed to go with these pure turf sprinters who are rocketing off away from her on the front end. And you can see towards the back of the pack, she's going to leave the pan shot here and just be at the back of this field for most of the running. This was a horse who did not attract that much support on debut, going off at 34-1 for trainer Gustavo Delgado, and actually the connections of last year's Kentucky Derby winner Mage. But you're going to see her come back into the picture as they round the far turn here, coming to the top of the stretch, and she's never inside. She's traveling at about the 3 path around the far turn here. That is the last one on the left of the screen towards the back of the pack, and she's going to leave the picture again, but notice her as the horses cross the finish line, because she's about 8 lengths back at the top of the stretch, and she's going to make up quite a bit of ground to only lose this race by less than 3 lengths as they come across the wire here. You're going to see her come back into the picture right about here as she's closing on these runners, really without being asked that much, coming across the wire. And this just feels like a horse that didn't take money on debut, was just really out there for experience, first time out. And I wonder if she's a horse that might ultimately want to go a little bit longer down the line. Hard to read too much into this pedigree. She's by Twirling Candy out of an Uncle Mo mare, but there really isn't too much production on the dam side to suggest what distance this horse might really prefer down the line. But I did really like the finish of this horse's race. Looking at some of the Gmax fractions, she came home her final quarter mile in 22.3 seconds, which is significantly faster than anybody else in this field. And you kind of saw that on the visual with the amount of ground that she was able to make up through that short stretch run going the 5 furlong distance at Gulfstream Park. So I just think this is a horse that you want to follow moving forward, because I don't think we saw the best that she's capable of achieving on debut, and likely to take a step forward, whether it's next time or a couple starts down the line. Let's move on to another debut runner, taking a look at a race from Oaklawn Park last Saturday, February 24th. This was that Rebel card, and we'll get to the Rebel in just a little bit. But first, we're going to take a look at the second race on that Saturday card, a maiden special weight event going 6 furlongs for the 3-year-olds on the dirt, of course. And we're going to focus on the number 6, Mo El Grande, as we take a look at the start of this race. And you can see him just breaking from the gate behind the field. He's slow into stride. And from the first couple of jumps, you can tell one thing about this horse, and that he is not a dirt sprinter. You could just sort of see it in his stride leaving the gate. He's just moving at a slower pace than the rest of the horses. The cadence to his stride is a little bit slower. And you can just see on this pan shot, he's got a lot of length to him. He just does not travel or look like a horse that really wanted to sprint 6 furlongs on debut. And you can see through the running of this race, while he's lagging behind the field, not showing a ton of early speed, he's going to show some ability here, because this was a race that went pretty fast. 80 Beyer speed figure to the winner, actually a 111 Timeform US speed figure for the winner of this race. So it was a solid maiden field, and you can see this first-time starter start to advance towards the back of the pack, but watch what happens here as he comes into the screen towards the inside. That is him in the red cap, now to angle towards the inside, highlighted right here, and he's going to get himself into a pretty tight spot about the 3/16 pole right there, almost bouncing off another rival towards the inside, losing a bit of momentum, but he continues to maintain that stride. You could see him just sort of loping up the inside. He's by by Uncle Mo, and he's got very much that Uncle Mo action, that high striding, long reach to the stride, and he's actually going to get up for third in this race. And there he is, finishing with good momentum across the finish line. Just feels like a horse that really needed this experience on debut, and also wants no part of going 6 furlongs. I would imagine he's a horse going out for trainer Randy Morse that is going to stretch out next time out, whether it be the 2 turns at Oaklawn Park or wherever he decides to go, maybe to Kentucky. This is a horse that we're going to see better from going longer in the future. Like I said, he's by Uncle Mo. The Dam was just a pure dirt router. She tried stakes a couple times, but really was much more of a routing type, achieving her victories going longer on the dirt. So I think we're going to see much better when Mo El Grande stretches out for likely his next race or a couple starts down the line. Then we'll finish things up on this edition of Horses to Watch with another race from that Saturday card at Oaklawn Park. This was race 11, the Rebel Stakes, the Grade 2 Derby Prep, and mile 16th is the distance for the 3-year-olds. Let's break these runners from the gate, and we're going to focus on the number 11, Just Steel, who you can see just is really done no favors by the post position and the start of this race, because he doesn't break that sharply from post 11, gets another rival crossing in front of him, and he is just forced to go legitimately 5 to 6 wide into the clubhouse turn. And this is a common theme for Just Steel, because you might remember he is making his second entry onto the Horses to Watch list for this wintertime, because he also had a similarly tough trip in the Southwest that day against what I thought was a rail bias. This day at Oaklawn, the track seemed a little fairer, but still, you don't want to get caught out wide in no man's land like this horse was for every step of his trip. And you can see he's getting a little keen down the backstretch, wanting to run forward. And that's a function of the fact that he has no cover in front of him. He's a horse who does do some of his best running when he's forwardly placed, and he probably wants to get forward from that position, being wide out the entire step of the way, every step of the way. But he just can't ever get over or get forward in this race because Rowan Vasquez is trying to do the right thing by rationing out his speed, but just given the bad hand that he was dealt by the post position, he never has a chance to get decent position in this race. And you can see here, even traveling around the far turn, he's trying to advance, he's moving well, but he's legitimately 5 wide all the way around the far turn. You could see the horse who eventually wins the race, Timberlake, he kind of takes his spot as he angles 4 wide in front of Just Steel, pushing it out 1 path further as they come to the top of the stretch. And he just continues to take this overland route into the stretch. And you could see here, from this point forward, he has really no chance. He stays on decently to beat about half the rivals in here. He ultimately finishes 7th in this race, but just no chance to achieve a higher placing than that, given all the ground that he covered and that terrible trip that he had to endure. Now, what are Just Steel's prospects moving forward on the Kentucky Derby Trail? I don't really know. I thought he ran pretty well in the Southwest, considering his trip, and here, just really no chance to achieve a better placing than he did. Regressed from an 88 buyer in the Southwest to a 77 this time, but obviously all of the ground lost had everything to do with that. I do think he's a horse that has a lot more ability than his recent results might indicate. Is he the kind of horse that can be competitive in a race like the Kentucky Derby? Can he even qualify for that race? That might be a bit of a stretch for him, but he's probably going to come back in the Arkansas Derby next time. Dwayne Lucas loves to run his horses through these Derby preps, sort of regardless of results, keeping them on that aggressive schedule. So I do think he's a horse that has the potential to outrun his odds in a race like the Arkansas Derby, but I also think he's the kind of horse that you just want to keep tabs on for the future. Maybe eventually, when they turn him back in distance to a 1-turn race, I think a race like the Pat Day Mile could be the perfect time to capitalize on a couple of the trips that this horse has gotten over the winter at Oaklawn Park. So just a horse to keep in the back of your mind moving forward for that race when he finally does land in the perfect spot and draws a better post position than he's gotten in the last 2 races in these Derby preps at Oaklawn Park. So those are all the horses to watch this week. If you want to follow these runners moving forward, you can add them to your horse watch on DRF.com. Just add them to your list and you'll get email notifications when these horses are entered back in the future. You can also go into your DRF formulator or Timeform US past performances and make trip notes on these horses. And those notes that you write will show up in the running lines when these horses come back and are entered for their next starts in the DRF past performances. So everybody, thanks for tuning in to Horses to Watch this week. I'll be back with another batch of replays to look at next week.